Welcome to Chick Chat with Unapologetically Karen, the podcast for women by women. I'm Karen Webb, architect, author, entrepreneur, creative junkie, and your host. Chick Chat is your resource for building your big, bold, and beautiful feminine life. So join me for some eye-opening and jaw-dropping dialogue that has people talking. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Chick Chat. Today's guest is Pam Nemec. She is not your average keynote speaker and not your average executive coach. With 2 decades at Whataburger, I think is how you say it, the iconic multi-billion-dollar restaurant chain owned for its stellar culture and the diehard customer base. Pam led a 200-strong team across 13 states and connected over 50,000 employees. As one of just 2 women in senior leadership, Pam blazed trails in a male-dominated industry, earning multiple awards for her creative, results-driven approach to using employee and customer communication to inspire a high-performing culture. Her game-changing strategies haven't just won over staff and customers. She's earned features in top-tier publications like USA Today, QSR, and Texas Monthly, solidifying her status as a true thought leader. Pam champions the belief that a company's sustainable success really hinges on the cohesion and happiness of its people. Her unique approach to revolutionizing leadership and communication systems is innovative and really inspiring. She's on a mission to help leaders build unbeatable brands from the inside out. As a keynote speaker and executive coach, Pam shares her transformative insights in her proprietary model, the Remarkable Brand Blueprint, 8 steps to build an unbeatable brand from the inside out. Welcome, Pam. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Karen. Looking forward to this.
Long time that you were with Whataburger. I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's funny because that's so unusual these days. And in fact, I used to I just recalled this story the other day because when I used to interview people, I was very passionate about the brand. I was very passionate about the company. I loved it. And so people could see that, and then they would find out how long I had been at the company.
Yeah.
And you could see this look of almost confusion and dismay that someone could stay at a company that long, Yeah. And it's not the norm. And but for me, I had such a good run and had great leaders around me, and I enjoyed it a lot. So I stayed.
Yeah,
I stayed
that's
for 20
great.
years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is not the usual norm anymore.
Yeah.
So tell me a little. So, you mentioned in there that it is a male-dominated field. How did you experience that? And did you see it change over time or not?
It was, there's a lot of men that I worked with, and, I really didn't think a lot of it when I first started. I just worked within the industry I was in, and I found that you have to go into those rooms with confidence, but not cockiness.
Absolutely.
And I find that that's the best way. And honestly, that's the best way, whether you're dealing with men or women, right? Just being your real authentic self. And knowing that you belong. And I think that's half the battle. I think a lot of times we overthink our presence in those rooms. And I guess for me, I just went, you know what? I'm here to do great work. Mm-hmm. I'm here to help the company. I'm here to help the people within this company. And so my voice needs to be heard just as much as anybody else in this room. And that was the attitude I had. And I also had really, really strong mentors that helped me along the way. So anytime I might have doubted myself or started feeling like, hey, I feel like I'm getting marginalized here, I had people I could go to and say, hey, I see something happening here and I don't appreciate it. Right. And it would quickly adjust, I may not say it that directly, but I was pretty direct. But yeah, I just find that when you are in a company, and whether you're, again, I think it's whether you're a man or a woman, but it's particularly as a woman, you just have to know what you're doing. You have to be so good at your job that they want you at the table and they want you in the room, and they come to you when they need help because they know that you're going to offer smart solutions to whatever situation is going on. And I think if you can continuously prove yourself, that, whether or not you're male or female, just kind of goes off the table. That's irrelevant. It becomes
Right.
about who they need in that room. And I'm making myself laugh because I'm thinking about, you want me on that wall, right? You got to become the person you want on the wall with you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that's the most important thing that women need to remember, because if you focus on everything you cannot control, you will grow frustrated quickly. So focus on what you can control and focus on being the absolute best at your job, and just don't let anybody get in your head,
Yes,
you
I think
know?
that's the biggest thing you said,
Yeah,
is that oft while even in a male-dominated industry, of course, you may get some resistance, some pushback. Who knows? And usually, if that happens, I think it's at the onset. When you haven't had a chance to really
sure.
prove yourself, have more experience, kind of gain more stability. But I do agree with you. I think we tend to put that seed of self-doubt in our own head. And
Mhm.
so if there is anything from the outside that's questioning if we should be at that table, we immediately start to attack our own selves.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
you. I think we need to hold that confidence from the get-go.
And Karen, I think you bring up a really good point too. I'm speaking from, 30-year career here. I guarantee you that my 25-year-old self didn't walk in with that kind of confidence, right? I was
Right,
probably a lot more there to learn and listen and be supportive and that sort of thing. I think that the confidence comes with time, it comes with
right,
experience, it comes with overcoming the problems that show up in your business. It comes with recognition and people saying, "Hey, that was a solution we would have never thought of. Thank you." It's those things that build that confidence. I wasn't confident like this when I was 25 years old. And I
right.
still have moments of insecurity or imposter syndrome. I still do. I mean, I think that's just, let's be honest
I
here,
think that's human nature. I think that is human
Sure.
nature. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me a little what was the biggest kind of message or help or work that you provided for the company?
Well, when I first started, I was a marketing manager, and so I was like 32 years old at the time. So I started
Hmm.
as a marketing manager. I had 2 young children at home, and I thought, I had been had a small business that I was running at the time. I decided to go back into the corporate world. I got this job at Whataburger at the time, and I had always loved the brand, and I was like super excited about that. So I started working as a marketing manager, but I was quickly recruited into communications
Okay.
by a mentor of mine, Todd Curver. So he recruits me to the communications department. Well, I stayed in that area for 18 years, and actually 20 years, but I just was running all of communications, and I just continued to get more and more. So the communications involved both internal and external communication. And so over time, I just kept growing my scope and expanding my I guess influence in the organization until they also asked me to run HR. So I also ran HR for a couple of years, and that was a whole other level of. And I was still running
Yeah.
communications. That was a whole nother level, and it was great because I had an amazing team. And I think that's the other thing that I would tell any woman out there that's listening is you're going to get opportunities along your path, and there are going to be times where you're like, I'm not sure that I'm prepared for that, or I'm not sure I'm qualified for that,
Hmm.
or whatever, again, self-doubt that comes into your head. I had all of those feelings when the CEO and the COO asked me if I would take on HR. In fact, I've actually verbalized them. I was like, really?
You're like,
You
what?
know, I'm communications.
Yeah.
But they were like, no, but you love people. And we really have faith in you that you'll take care of people. And I was like, well, yes, I can definitely say I will do that. But what I realized is when you say yes to opportunities, even if they scare you, they'll lead to great things. And in this case, the reason that it led to great things was because the team that was in place, they knew what they were doing. They knew. They didn't need me to tell them what to do. They just needed me to clear the obstacles, provide support, give them the guidance when things were kind of going off the rails. That was my job. My job was not to do their work. And my job was also not to tell them that their idea was bad and my idea was the best. It
Right.
was to guide them. And I think that that's something that we forget as women. I think women are great leaders because we do listen and we're willing to admit when we don't know. And I think people appreciate that. In fact, I know they do.
Yeah,
Because
I would agree with you. They do. Right.
yeah. And I went from a team of 2 people to a team of 200 people. And we connected 50,000 people in the organization. And, through that experience, I have learned, and this is why I coach and I consult on this and speak. And that's this. There's a common theme that has run through every job I've ever had, regardless of how big the team was or not. People want 2 things. They want to be informed. So communication is critical. You've got to tell people what is going on so that they're equipped to do their job, and they are, and they feel like they're part of the plan. So that's one thing, and that's thing that for whatever reason companies struggle with mightily.
Yeah.
The second thing that people want is they want connection, and they want to be connected to a leader who cares. They want to be connected to a company that they appreciate their values and want to represent. And I think if you can provide the communication and the connection, you're starting to form a better culture. But with a lot of companies, they focus on compensation, perks, and parties. And
Wow.
everybody
Yeah.
does that. Everybody has perks and parties, right? I mean, and that was
Yeah.
cool, like in the 80s, right? Everyone wanted parties.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's
I'm not
going
sure.
to get.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And I do think that the pool of workers now and just the age, and demographic of them, this generation is less interested in that
Yeah,
than
absolutely.
ever before, don't you think? Yeah. What is their, prime ask? Like, what is it that they really want to be, to happen so that they are retained as employees?
Right. I mean, and what you'll read is, and they're saying right now, 60% of employees say that they don't even have the information and the tools to do their job well. 50% of employees
Wow.
are saying they don't understand their role and they'll probably leave within a year.
Oh my goodness.
So that tells me that you can throw as many amazing parties as you want to, and you can pay them a lot and you can give them benefits, but that will make them stay for a while. I've seen this. It will make them stay for a while. But if you are not demonstrating respect through communication and connection every day in the daily mundane operation of your business, and you're not giving them what they need to feel good about the work they do and to feel connected to the purpose of the organization.
Yes.
Then there's not enough money and there's not enough benefits and there's not enough parties in the world to keep them there. And
that is so true.
And we're seeing it in the statistics. And what else is interesting is that there are leaders that will tell you that 60% of leaders are saying, absolutely, culture is a competitive advantage. They know it is.
Right.
But only 20% have a plan to actually communicate and connect people to that culture.
Wow.
And so you're just hoping your culture is good and hoping that turns into performance is to me not the way to handle culture. I think culture is an asset that you should be running and leading and managing just like you lead your marketing team, right? Marketing is an asset in the company. They have the CMO at the top, right? You got your CMO in the C-suite, but
right.
sometimes you have the communications person in the C-suite. Sometimes you have them embedded into HR. Sometimes it's embedded into marketing. And what I advocate for is you should be treating that as an absolute important asset in your company. And you should create an entire team dedicated to that. And I teach a whole system around it. And I call it inside out communications, because I think that the inside of your company and the way you connect inside and create a culture can begin to cascade outside to your customer.
To your customer base.
And there's a whole way to do that through communication. But most times people leave it to chance. And they say, we have a culture. And anytime I ask people, hey, what kind of, what do you think about your company? How do you like working there? Or what do you guys do for culture in your company? Immediately they'll say, we do an awards program at the end of the year. We have this really fun event where we go off site and we, have a party. Or they'll tell me about the things they do. But what I'm really asking them is, how is culture embedded into your operation? And how are you communicating your culture in the way you behave, in the values you demonstrate, in the way you communicate, and how you operate your business? Because, like I said, I've found that it's in those moments that culture's really formed, not at the party. The party is the icing on the cake. But you got to have the cake, right?
So when you say on the day-to-day, how you communicate, how you give us some examples for people that are wondering, some concrete kind of examples of that.
Yeah. So I think that from a communications perspective, there's two roles that a communication team should be serving in your organization. And one is what I call just your look at it as your project management, almost like you have all of those projects that are happening every day inside your organization. And a lot of times those projects are communicated just to the people that are on the teams, right? But they're not communicated more broadly. And they're also not communicated from a cross-functional approach. So maybe the marketing team is absolutely on board, knows exactly what's about to happen, but they have failed to tell training. They've failed to tell the operators who have to execute it. They have failed to tell the communication team who wanted to communicate it, right? And so there's a lot of issues when it comes to cross-functional communication in an organization. And that's where things start to break down. People are And it's interesting because not only does it break down the project, it hurts your performance, right? Because you're going to have these missteps and complications and problems, but it just breeds disrespect, even if it's unintentional. People go, I don't feel respected because they didn't tell me that this was about to blow up my whole process over here.
So why was I not in the loop? Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. And most companies don't use their communications teams to support that. They just have it as a project manager. That's their role. I think that communications should be embedded into project management. Like, it should be part of the plan. You should have a communication plan for every project. And it should be thoughtful and mindful of all the people that are going to be impacted. And then really think through, how are you going to communicate that in all the different ways it needs to be communicated. So that's one aspect of a communication team. The other aspect of the communication team is being able to really share the story of your culture and in the various ways that can be told, right? So as an example, I could sit here and tell you these are the values of this company. This company says that they want people who have high integrity. They want people who demonstrate respect. They want to have people that are innovative. Okay, and you would go, okay, innovative, respect. I got it. Well, but what if instead of doing that, I said, I'm going to feature this person who's working at the front counter who has just demonstrated respect to a customer by telling a story. And in that
Hmm.
story, it is an actual video of the story. And it's like it immediately personalizes those values in a way that people can say, oh, okay, I
Right.
understand that value in the way it comes to life.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
want to, number one, I'm proud of the fact that we do that sort of thing. And number two, I want to emulate that value. And now I know what to do to make that come to life.
Right.
And so I think that people need examples. I don't think people need words on a poster. I don't think people need, chants at a meeting. I think they need examples. They need to see it. They need to feel it through story. And that's another piece of what this communication team should be doing is how are you telling your story? How are you spotlighting the behaviors that are good in your organization? Because the
Right.
more
I
you
like
do,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
the more you do that, less you have to tell everybody what's bad. Because
Right. Right.
what we focus on expands. And so if you focus on the negative, you're going to get more negative. But if you focus on the positive, you're going to get more positive. And that's what I advocate for is, and I think there's a whole, you're going to need the system to do this. And that's what I teach is don't leave it to chance. Don't give it to your admin. Don't have somebody in HR who already has 10,000 other things to do. Don't ask them to do this. This is so important, and you need a dedicated team to do it.
Now, what happens in a small business where maybe it's not corporate America and it's a few employees kind of thing and an
Mhm.
entrepreneur? Does that then just go on to the entrepreneur to make sure that that's the culture that they're creating?
Yeah, well, what I would say, and this has come up, and I've helped people that are in small businesses, and they're like, "Well, I can't afford that kind of structure and that kind of team." And I'm like, "Totally get it, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to build it out to the degree that a big company could. You can build it out from a freelance perspective, right? You can hire freelancers to support you in this effort. You don't have to have it on your, as part of your G&A. So I think that that's another way to look at this. And it's a matter of understanding what does an inside out communication team do and what does that require? And then decide where you can start. Where do you have time and where is the greatest need? And then focus those resources and what you can afford, focus there. Um, I don't want to ever make people feel like it's so big I can't do it. Because
Right.
that
Right.
is the kiss of death, right? It's so
Right.
big, I'm not
Yes.
even gonna try. And a lot of us feel that way when something's overwhelming. You're like, that's just not for me. I'm not gonna mess with that because I can't afford it. Well, I would say that may not be able to afford what the multi-billion-dollar company can afford, but you can afford a version of it. Um,
Right. Okay.
and
I like
and
that.
when
Yep.
you need it, right?
Hmm.
Plug it in
Hmm.
when you need it, but create a system for it because leaving it to chance doesn't seem to work. And if you don't believe me, ask that 60% of people who are telling everybody, I don't have the information tools to do my job,
Which is
right?
crazy to me. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
and I think the days of, I mean, I'm sure it still exists, but the days of just that hard boss that was kind of just on top of you, pushing you, those it doesn't work. And
mm-mm,
I think we've realized it. Um, I love when for myself, having been an architect and having had from one employee to 9 or 10, and just at a given time, the range.
mm-hmm,
But it's so important, I think, to bring that spirit of mentorship rather than, you know, um, just kind of beating them down, but really
yeah.
helping to build their skill set and praise their skill set and yeah, make them feel like a valuable asset to the company.
Right. And really let people run, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I think there's a tendency, especially when you're younger in your career. you feel like you have to do things for people or you can do it better than they can. So it'll
Right.
just be easier if I do it. I made that mistake when I was young. I did that. But I learned that no, it's not. It's not faster if I just do it. What's
Right.
faster is if I take you say slow down to speed up. If I slowed down and I would just take an hour to meet with that person and talk to them and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Here's the project. What do you think? Here's kind of what I'm thinking. Here's some things to watch out for. And,
Yes.
how can I best support you? And then let them go. I find that people appreciate that more than they appreciate you dictating the solution
I
or
absolutely agree
taking
with you. Yeah.
taking the product they just
Yeah.
gave you and rewriting it, right? Or something
Right.
along those lines. That is not
Uh-huh.
appreciated, right? And I made those mistakes myself and I just learned the hard way. Like, don't do that. People don't like it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think it's almost an insecurity in your own leadership at first because you're just not sure. You think that's the expectation. You're like, well, maybe that's what they want me to do.
Right.
Um, I'm coaching a client right now, and they actually said that to me. He's like, and it was like kind of thinking like, yeah, I'm supposed to do it that way. And I just want to give everyone permission that no, you shouldn't have to do the work if you're at a certain, if these people, if it's their assignment and they've worked on that and say it came back to you and you're like, I'm not really loving the direction it's going, resist the urge to sit down and redo it for them.
Absolutely.
Don't do that. Right? Call them up, talk to them,
Yes.
explain what you're seeing, and let them keep going because they're going to learn so much more from that
Right.
approach.
That's very true. I think you're right but I do think what happens is a lot of business owners are just like, we got to get this out for the customer. Um, they're so
Hmm.
much more focused on getting that thing done and that way they can invoice for it or they can, move it along. But yeah, we do have to sit back and go, but in the long run, if we slow it down and train that employee so
Yeah.
well that you know, they can then run with almost any project we give them, that's incredible. Yeah.
Sure.
And I find that especially in architecture because there's definitely the skill set of, drawing and measuring and how to cut sections, how to all of that. But the biggest thing and the hardest thing to teach is an employee to grab onto the style that you have. It's sort of they have
Yes.
to be a sponge. And that's the part I love is those that I've mentored that just get it, like just flourish because
Yep.
they've become so good at the entire picture. So, but it does take
Right.
more time. But yeah, you've got to like value that. Hmm.
Yeah. It takes more time in the beginning, but it saves you so much time in the end.
Yes.
And the context that you provide people back to communication can help them create such a better product versus just a quick email that says here's the assignment, I need it by such and such date, make sure it has these two things. you know Instead of calling
Yeah.
them into your office or calling them up on the phone and saying, hey, here's why this project came about. Here's what we're trying to actually achieve with this.
Yes.
This is the purpose of it. There's some camps that are thinking we should do it this way. There's some other camps that think we should do it that way. I think there's a middle ground, but so let's think, but be mindful that these are going to be people that are asking you about these things. All that context is so helpful to people when they're
Yes.
trying to build something, because the other most frustrating thing, and this happened to me again when I was early in my career, is I would be given an assignment with very little context. And so
Hmm.
I thought, man, I killed it. Oh boy, that's going to
Right.
be so
Right.
good, And then I go and I show up and they're like looking at me like I have 9 heads. And they're like, no, this is so off base. And it was so frustrating to me because I
Right.
thought, no, it's so good. But the truth was, it wasn't good because
But you had no
I
way of
didn't have the
knowing.
context, right?
Right, right. You don't know
And
what their goal is, what they're
yeah,
trying to achieve, all of that. Yep, yep.
yeah. So I mean, I think that's just it's important at work. It's important in a relationship of any kind, um, whether it's with your children or with your spouse. It's just important. You've got to take the time to give some context so that people understand where you're coming from, not just what you're telling them to do.
Exactly. And that they are important enough to hear the whole story. You know,
Sure.
you value them enough to hear the whole story, and then they're that much more kind of embedded in your company. Because
Yeah.
they understand, what the aspiration is, what we're trying to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so
Um,
much more buy-in that way, you
yes, it
know?
is. Yes.
Yeah,
They feel like they're partnering with you as opposed to just, doing the grunt work for you.
absolutely.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. I think that is a world of difference. And I do think yeah, without that, employees just bounce. They bounce to
And
the
yeah,
next.
yeah. So, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what every leader out there is trying to stop, right? There this turnover is
Mm-hmm.
it's not just expensive because it's costly to
Yeah.
lose good people, but it's also time consuming because you're having to retrain a brand new person and do it all over again versus going, you know what, I'm going to invest in better communication in this organization and I'm going to make it to where it's almost foolproof. For if you want the information, it is there for you and you can get
Right.
it. That doesn't mean leaders shouldn't be communicating to their team. That's not what I'm saying, but you have to make sure the leaders have a full context. Because
Right.
sometimes the leaders don't even
Exactly.
have the full context and they're trying
Right.
to guide a team. So I think it's so important. If people are wanting to stop turnover and engage and get better engaged employees and create better performance in their organization and ultimately build a really remarkable brand that connects both inside and out, they need to take a minute and realize that maybe your answer isn't as fancy as you think. Maybe it's simple need to get back to the basics. How are you communicating and how are you connecting people to the work of the organization and to the culture of this company? That's the two things you need to be working
Right.
on,
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
that's what people have to deal with every day, right?
Yep.
They
Yeah.
look at their paychecks come in every 2 weeks, right? And that's going to keep you there for a while. But every day they have to deal with the environment that you create at work. And that
Yes.
environment is largely dictated by how people talk to one another, how people keep people informed, what's the culture like? Is it is
Right.
it is it inspiring or is it just you walk out of there and go, "Thank God I get to go home." Right?
Yeah. Oh, gosh, that is the truth. You're absolutely right
Right?
because it is. It's like when your employee goes home, what do they say to their family about it?
That's it.
Or what are they thinking? And it's an everyday thing. Like, was work great? Did I feel inspired or like I was, respected or acknowledged or anything?
Yeah.
That's the day to day. You're right. That paycheck is not thought about every day. Mm-mm.
No. And
Right.
you can feel it too when you go into, I mean, have you ever been into like a store? Let's say we're all women, we love to shop, right? So we go
Mm-hmm.
into a retail outlet. And I don't know about you, but lately I go into retail outlets and I can't hardly find somebody
Oh,
to
I
help
know.
me, right? It is a skeleton crew, and the people that are there are typically don't look like they want to be there. And so then they make me feel like I don't want to be there. And
Yes.
that's the point of culture. So it translates to the customer. So I've been on the inside, of course, as the employee, but I'm also as a customer, I can walk into any establishment and I can feel whether or not
Oh,
those
yes.
folks are
Yes.
happy or those folks are like watching the clock thinking, how when does my shift end and when can I get out of here?
You know what's so
And
funny about that? So my husband and I just came back from a trip, and we were in Barcelona and took a cruise from there. And we were
amazing.
shopping. Yeah, it was an amazing trip. We were shopping in, where was in Cannes in France, and he's in, of course, it's like I can only shop a few times or he's going to start, moaning and groaning about it. So he's like, okay, let's go do this. So he's kind of following me around in there and he goes, I think you have to check yourself out and like when you want to pay. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And he goes, I don't see a single employee in here. And sure enough, you go to a machine. This blew me away. You take, so I had like a dress and a shirt and a skirt, and and they've got the sensors and all that and their tags. You just drop it into a basket, literally. Somehow the computer reads what it is, and there's your total. But it was, and I was getting frustrated because it was also a little glitchy, but I was like, this just took out all the fun of shopping. There was
Yes.
no interaction. In fact, the only interaction was when a light went on, and then the one person in the store surfaced and she came over and did something to fix it and walked away. And I was like, okay. And you have to pay extra for a bag. So typically it just sends you off with your stuff. You have to figure out how to get those sensors off, which I don't know. I didn't even know how to do it. And they have a little video for you I was like, wow, that was such a poor experience because of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And let me say that is based on the culture of that company.
Absolutely. It has
That's
to
all
be.
that is. I mean, that's where it comes from, right? And that culture has decided that efficiency is more important than connection. And it's more important than the customer experience. They've convinced themselves that the customer wants this quick, no contact with humans experience. And that's what they're providing now. And I think that's going to get worse before it gets better. I think there's a lot of people on the train right now going, yes, that's how the world has got to be. And that's how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I would argue this. Sure. I think all of us like those great, efficient processes. I mean, who doesn't love an Amazon delivery, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, no matter how amazing technology gets, human beings aren't going to change the core needs that they have to connect.
Absolutely.
And
It is
just not.
Yeah, it's a human thing. In contrast to it, and I can't remember where I read this. It was in a newspaper, but I can't remember where it was about, what country or what place. There, on the opposite end of this, there's a supermarket where there's a lot of elderly in the area and they want a slower checkout, not just because it's chaotic. They want to talk to the checkout cashier, which is like, that is their one interaction with a person. So they've literally created a line. One of the checkouts is the slow one. You can tell the story, which sometimes would drive me nuts. I'd be like, let's go, people, I got to get to work. But you can imagine, it's kind of cute, for some people, that is the joy of going to the market and talking to people and telling them, I bought all this, my son's coming for dinner or whatever. But they actually have changed their store to do that, to provide that.
And I think that's something that, I mean, good for them, because to
I wish
me,
I could remember the name, but it was remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, with the fact that you would adjust your service model to adapt to the different generations that you're serving, which is what sounds like they've done.
Yes.
They've adapted the service model to the generations. And so, yes, I mean, maybe a young teenager who doesn't like to talk to people because they haven't developed fully on their social skills.
Yeah, they just want to text.
They don't want to do all the conversation. Okay, well, they can go over here. But for those of us that still like to talk to people and connect, even if it's not a long story, I just want a human being, because I just do. I can go over there and have a different experience, even though I still want to work, be at that store. And we see that at H-E-B down here in Texas. H-E-B's I see that changing with them. They have the express lane, which you only got 10 items, you can go through here. Or you can go through your regular line, or you have your self-checkout. And they have 2 or 3 people always staffed over there to kind of help folks.
Right.
But I think that's the way the world is going to have to evolve into. Where are we really going to land, right? Are we going to be
Yeah.
so digital that we don't even speak to one another anymore? I think
Yeah.
people
And
are
that's
so
a
lonely.
concern. I
Yeah.
agree. I think they're very lonely, very isolated. More and more people are working from home, which, can be convenient and can be great at certain times in our
Yeah.
lives, et cetera. But yeah, we do lose that interaction. And
Yeah.
as a culture, it's scary to think that we lose it. So it's interesting to see where it's popping up a little bit, like in this market. They clearly felt the feedback or heard the
Right.
feedback that we want to, chit chat a little without people glaring at us that we're talking too much. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I think that's awesome. And I think that's what the companies that to me will evolve and last and sustain themselves are those that are not just following the masses, but really listening to their employees and really listening to their
Yes.
customers. I wouldn't follow all the, okay, well, this new article came out and it said we all have to do this, right? A lot of
Right.
times you fall victim to that, and I think the smartest thing to do is to not let all that stuff, consider it, sure, but go back and talk to your people.
Yes.
Actually find out what they need and find out what they really are struggling with from an employee perspective, and then also same on the customer side, right? Understand really what they need, because that's where you're going to find the better solutions, not from a news article, in
Yeah.
Forbes or
And
USA Today.
how do you recommend, or what have you seen to be the best way to do that? So for a large, I mean, obviously in a smaller company, you may have reviews or just, checking in with each other. How's it going? But what about a large company? Do you do it as a survey? What have you seen as a good way to kind of have your finger on the pulse of what your employees feel?
Well, I don't think it's one thing. I think it's several things. I think that you should probably have an official feedback mechanism so people can always be providing their input, and you can always keep your fingers on the pulse of what's going
Mm-hmm.
on in the
Mm-hmm.
organization. So that's just a system, right? And that's more surveyed, like that
Okay.
you can survey people and ask them, hey, what are you thinking about X, Y, or Z? There's also, you could do just an anonymous, like a place where people can just, when they have a thought and they want to share it, but they don't want to get in trouble for sharing it, if that's
Right. Yeah.
because sometimes that happens. Have an anonymous way that they can provide their input on maybe a process that's really given them trouble, um, so that they can offer that up and you can look into it. But here's what I'd say about feedback. If they give you feedback, do not ignore it. You have to answer it, right? There's a lot of times we get the feedback and we go, oh, awesome. Okay, that was really helpful. And then we go on and we use the feedback, but we never loop back to the people that told us, even if it's the company
Yes.
at large, and say, oh man, thank you. Keep bringing that feedback to us, you guys, because that has helped us so much. That helped us innovate in this way. We're going to improve that process that was making you crazy. And, I just think that's an important aspect. And then the other way is, um, making sure that your leaders are weekly meeting with their people, and don't leave that to chance either, right? Schedule it.
Yes.
Like, put it on the calendar. I used to say, if it's not on my calendar, you guys, it's not going to happen, because
Yeah, it's true.
it was crazy, and so I just put everything that I thought related to the people and me staying connected and me communicating. That was going to be the priority, and all the other stuff that I had to do that maybe was, something, answering emails, that sort of thing, that would come later in the day. But I made sure that I made myself available during the day to help them, right? And talk to
Right.
them. And so every week I had one-on-ones with all of my direct reports, and we talked. And then we also did group meetings, but we just made sure we were talking and sharing
Yep.
information. So
Absolutely. Yeah, that
I
makes
think that's
sense.
important.
Um, yeah, for me recently, right now like I said, I've gone from one employee to 10, and right now I have Cambry, who works for me, who receive stuff with.
Yeah.
So she used to work in this office with me here we're in Arizona, in Fountain Hills.
Yeah.
And last year she needed to move to Florida. And I thought, and So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to find another employee. And she loved working here and had asked me, is there any way we can try this remotely? And I thought, okay, let's do that. And the one thing that I did, which I'm really thankful for, is I said, we will not talk on the phone. We will always FaceTime
Mm,
because, and what a difference, because it feels like she's in the desk next door. You know what I mean? Like you
sure.
feel you can see each other's body language, you can pick
Hmm.
up on little things. It's so important. So, yeah, that
Yes.
even with a remote setting that you stay ultra connected. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's and it's at first I know that was very hard for people. They weren't really sure how to do it. I think people are getting better at it now. But I agree with you. I remember having team meetings and people weren't turning their cameras on, and
Right.
it's when it was a group of people, and I was like that. We have got to be prepared to turn the cameras on, not because I care what you're dressed like or I don't care about that.
Exactly.
I just need to be able to talk to you, and I am a body language and eye
Yes.
contact person, and I think that that's another way that people need to connect,
Yep.
and I'll say this too. I think a lot of younger generation probably goes, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to be on camera and I don't need all that." I would argue, but maybe you do. Maybe
Right.
you do. Maybe it
Yeah.
is good for you. Maybe that, you know, um, having those conversations that feel more real and not like you're just kind of a bystander in a dark room listening in. Maybe that will help you, and just from a mental health standpoint, from a
Right.
just how you're feeling about things. I just can't imagine just never talking to people during the course
Right.
of a day.
No. No, I
Um,
can't either. Mm-mm. Yeah. It
so
makes you feel like you don't know them well enough then. You
yeah.
haven't. Yeah. I absolutely agree with you. So you work individually with companies. How is it that you work typically? Is it with an entire company? Is it with just the entrepreneur? Tell me a little bit about your program.
Okay. So typically, I will work with somebody that has, it's interesting, somebody that has been given the role of communication, but they're not real sure what they're supposed to
What to
do with
do?
it.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they're reaching out for understanding of how do I turn this communication team of one into something that can become really impactful in the organization. So that's one way that I go in and kind of sit down with them and create a strategy for doing that and help them build it out and show them again the whole system of here's what you're going to need to do this, once it's fully completed, this is what it would look like. But let's one step at a time. How do
Right.
we get there? And so I take them through a process. It's a workshop that I can do on site. I prefer to do it on site, but I can do it virtually. I'm also in the process of filming online courses as we speak. So I'll have it as an online course where people could just buy it
That's
and then
great.
they can
Yeah.
self pace, right? So it's kind of a do it yourself, do it with me, or I come in and really get in the weeds with you. So that's one way to work with me. And the other people that reach out to me are CEOs that go, I have like a person in communication, but I really need a team that's helping support me and my leadership team and all the messaging that we want to cascade in the organization. I need a way to do that. Can you help me? And then again, I teach them how to build this inside out communication system that is not just supporting their culture, it's building their brand and it's improving their performance. And that's what I'm
Right.
about is yes, I want to improve your culture because I want people to be happy working there and I want to solve those headaches that you might be having because they're not. But I'm also trying to build your brand and I'm trying to improve your performance because all of those things go hand in hand.
Yeah, they're
And
all linked together, aren't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I just teach the system on how to do it. And if you can do the whole, um, if you can afford the all the team, great, do that. But I know that people can't, so I
Hmm.
teach them how to build into it.
That's fantastic. So it's been so nice having you. You've got like a wealth of information. If people want to reach out directly to you,
Mhm.
um, tell us the best way, what you can offer them.
Okay, awesome. The easiest way to get in touch with me is to go to my website. It's pamnemec.com, and it's spelled Nemec, which I assume you'll put in your show notes.
It will be, yes.
Yeah. So it's pamnemec.com. And if you go there, you'll see at the top, it says book a free call. You just click on that. You can book a free call through my Calendly. It's super easy. And I offer that to find out, hey, what's going on in your organization. And then I will tell you whether or not I think I'm the one to help you, or maybe there's somebody else they'd be better suited. But it's just a conversation to see what's happening in the organization. And I can say, yeah, I think that's this solution I have will work. Or I might say, you know what, you're not ready for that, but maybe this, so
Right. Okay.
yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, that is fantastic because we do have a lot of listeners that, either own their own businesses or are in corporate America. This is advice anybody can really use. And I think you're right. Our overall company success is very tied to our work culture and
Yeah,
our employee satisfaction.
for
Definitely.
sure.
Well,
So
it's been a
yeah,
pleasure to have you on this. Thank you so much, Pam. Thank you for being
thank
here.
you. It's been great.